Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. It is an exciting day for so many across the country. It's a day anticipated throughout the year, the Union Budget. That'll be presented by the Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, at 11 a.m. But in the run-up to the budget, join me, Vishnu and my colleague, Manvi Sinha Dhillon, over the next several hours as we go through every aspect of what we can hope for. Will there be big differences, for example, in income tax? What about housing? What about education? What about health? What about a host of different areas of the budget which affect so many across India? India's economy at this stage is doing very well. If you look at the macroeconomic statistics, 7% GDP growth projected, and those numbers seem fairly astounding, I would say, considering what we are seeing across the world. But that's the macro picture. On the ground, there are so many areas which we would need to improve on. We'd like to do a lot more in terms of increasing or enhancing growth, as it were. We're going to be reaching out to our correspondents across the field over the next couple of hours as well to bring you voices of the common person, what their hopes are, what their dreams are. Will the budget be able to fulfill all of that? Remember, this is being seen very much as an election budget. The election is just around the corner, a couple of months away. Therefore, there is a huge expectation that that could be something which the government is keeping, their focus on. The finance minister is keeping her focus on as she gets ready with the budget. We're going to just briefly go through a couple of key points. We've got our panelists who will be coming in. Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya is with me this morning. Thanks very much, Jayajit, for being with us. He's a digital policy expert. So much of our economy is on digital. It's on digital exports. It's an area where we've done so well. The big buzz around the world now, and certainly as far as our economy is concerned, is also artificial intelligence. Is there somewhat of a concern that with artificial intelligence technologies being available in so many parts of the world, the advantage that we enjoy with our digital exports could be impacted?
I think there will be multiple impact of artificial intelligence, as we are all aware of. Clearly, there will be a dent in our advantage that we have in terms of the trained workforce that we have, one of the largest in the world in terms of developing code and developing technology. A lot of it is being taken over by AI, and we have seen that as the year rolled by, of the large number of job cuts that happened in large big tech companies. That's a direct outfall of having AI in place. Also, the rate at which AI is being adopted, it's not the same as any other automation that has happened in the last 100, 150 years. Every time automation has happened, there has been some job loss, but the number of jobs created has been far larger. If I look at the simple issue of taxis being rolled out in Delhi, the Tongawalas went on strike saying their jobs will be lost, but there were far more taxi drivers who got employment. But with AI, there is an extreme automation that's happening and happening extremely fast, which makes it very difficult for both policymakers and the economy to adjust quickly to create the same number of jobs that will get lost, or if not, more, but at least the same number of jobs. So that becomes another challenge. And these are not jobs which are low-paying jobs. These are high-paying jobs, highly skilled jobs, which are getting challenged by AI. Eventually, over a period of time, we will find more jobs getting created. But it's a short-term pain which will be very difficult to manage. It's inevitable and difficult to manage because it's happening very, very quickly.
Okay. We've also got Nirav Choksi with us and Jayant Krishna. Thank you, Mr. Choksi. And thanks, Mr. Krishna, very much for being with us. So it's an exciting day. We expect so much. Nirav Choksi, let me come to you first. I was going through the Indian Economy Review, which is a document which has come out by the Chief Economic Advisor just a couple of days back. And my question to you pertains to the macroeconomic scenario in the country. And it says, quite interestingly, it's one thing for India to grow at 8 to 9% when the world is growing at 4%, but it's another thing to grow at above 7% when the world is struggling to grow at just about 2%. I think that's important because it reflects the qualitative difference which we have in the Indian economy, the basis upon which we really want to build up. Would you agree?
I would agree. I think we've done a stellar job in terms of economic growth, but let's not forget one other statistic which is very important. Over the last 10 years, per capita income in this country has just about doubled. and inflation has really wiped out those gains. So what I'm really hoping for is that the government looks at empowering the per capita income for the country at large, and that drives economic growth rather than just macro factors.
Jayant Krishna, of course, supply chain disruptions is a worry for economies around the world, but certainly for India as well. If you look at what the situation is in the Red Sea, the fact that marine commerce is being targeted at this stage, that would have a knock-on effect. The price of logistics would go up, certainly. It could impact inflation down the road as well. Is that an area of concern, supply chain disruptions taking place?
See, Vishnu, these supply chain disruptions are beyond the control of any country, leave aside India. But the fact is, what we could control, I mean, things, for example, ease of doing business in our country. While in the last 9 years, 10 years, ease of doing business ranking has improved. But is it good enough? We really have to look at. I mean, if we today are the fourth largest economy, why shouldn't we as a nation aspire to be among the top 10 ease of doing business nations? I think a lot, while at the top level, at the political level, at the bureaucratic level, things have improved. But where the common day-to-day interaction happens with the business community and those in the government, I think that hasn't improved as much, And other thing, the all overseas investors. See, today we have seen in post-COVID how the entire world is looking at the possibility of relocating part of their manufacturing supply chains to India, And how will that happen? While India is poised as the top contender in that space, but what is happening on the ground, I think that's very, very important. See, all overseas investors, when they come to India or they plan to contemplate to come to India, they expect some kind of a regulatory certainty, which is very, very important over and above the ease of doing business. The rules of engagement cannot change midway. The rules of engagement when they had decided to put in FDI to the time when they actually implement the project and be in the post-operative stage, I think they have to continue. Some minor tweaking needs to keep happening, but the broad directional changes cannot happen. That's very, very important. Other is that India as a country, we have to make our trade regime more liberal. Somehow we still have a lot of high import tariffs, import duties are still very, very high on a large number of goods and components and so on and so forth and materials. And the pretext India has been taking is that, we must protect our domestic industry and so on and so forth. But I think a ridiculously high import duty on many products does not help that at all. Actually, it promotes mediocrity in your domestic production. And if you look at the longer value chain, it also impedes, export of more value-added products where those imported components are a part of and so on and so forth. So I think we have to look at the larger picture. That's very, very important and not lose sight of. But having said so, I mean, this is an interim budget. This is a vote on account. And the fact is, good economics still doesn't make good politics in our country, and more so in the election year. So I think if you look at the history of most of the election year budgets, they have been populist.
What you're saying quite clearly, Jayjit. Let's address the key issue over here. Elections in just a couple of months from now. That being the case, there is every expectation that this could actually appeal to a large group or large segments in our population.
As a citizen, I would really look forward to a populist budget because, that's something that we gain. But if you look at the budget of 2019, which was again an election budget, it was again a vote on account. It did not turn out to be a populist budget.
Yeah.
So if you go by precedence, then I'm not really expecting too many SOPs to be out there. I think it'll be a business as usual kind of a budget. More importantly, the focus is essentially on getting enough money for the government to run till May, June when the next government comes in. Obviously, the indication seems to be that the same government has a high chance of coming back. But till the time the protocol dictates that no large policy decisions are made through the financial outlays and through the budgeting process. So I'm not really expecting any large signaling to happen or any large budget outlay for populist measures to be announced here.
Mr. Choksi, again, let's just focus on the macro picture a little bit more, since I'm sure we'll get down to the specifics over the next several hours. climate change adaptation, building resilience, mitigating emissions, three phrases used again by the chief economic advisor in his report. It's not an option. It's something that industry needs to do. It's something which all of us need to be a part of. How, in what way, shape or form do you expect these three themes coming into the union budget?
Well, we would expect, I think, more incentives for companies to adopt these changes and also look at tax benefits for companies, enhanced tax benefits for companies to adopt green energy, to adopt climate change. I think that's something that I would look forward to in this budget.
All right, Mr. Choksi, let's just focus on a couple of areas, specific areas. Employment generation, obviously, one of the most important, if not the most important, given the overall state of the economy this time around. Associated with that, Mr. Choksi, is, of course, skill development. The two go hand in hand. And skill development so very important given our young population, our demographic dividend, as it were. So, in terms of your expectations on A, skill development, and B, employment generation, what would you like to see?
Well, I don't think, I think they go hand in hand. I think what the government has done prudently over the last several years is to build upskilling centers near industry, near large conglomerate industries. And I think that should continue. That should be given more impetus. That drives employment. But I think that needs to be nationalized. It needs to go across the country. I think it's done very well in certain pockets, but it needs to be spread out a lot more. So more investment would need to go in upskilling, and that hopefully would drive more employment.
Jayant Krishna, would you like to add to that? The need for investments or continued investments in upskilling and reskilling. I think the need to skill is so closely linked, for example, with our existing education system, which encourages degrees and people going into specific areas of work. There's never been any real focus or agenda in providing diplomas for people across the board, picking up skills which actually result in jobs. So when we talk about expanding our economy and going beyond time-tested degrees in colleges and universities, how important is reskilling?
So, Vishnu, I think India needs to, I think when this government came to power in 2014, they had launched the Skill India mission, and there was a lot of focus in the beginning. But of late, I seen that it has run out of steam. I think that's very, very important. I mean, if India has to reach demographic dividend, it's very important. But let's take a step back and look at how much we spend on education and skills as a sector. If you look at the government spend on education and skills, it is just about 3% of GDP. If you look at most developed countries, I mean, they spend anywhere between 6 to 8 to 10% of its GDP on education and skills. I think it's very, very important. It's time. I know it's an interim budget, but you can't expect miracles. But I think could the budget herald a change in that direction, that it steps up the commitment and the allocations for education and skills from 3% to almost 6%. Even if you look at our Human Development Index rank, which is around 130th. If we are the fourth largest economy in the world today, our Human Development Index lags behind very, very substantially, largely because of education, skills, and healthcare. I think it's time that we must step up investment in that level. I talked about education and skills and also healthcare, where we spend just about 2% of our GDP right now. It has to go up to at least, it has to be doubled. I think that's very, very important if health for all has to be realized. COVID did expose some of the inadequacies in our healthcare system. So I think education, skills, and healthcare is very, very important. Otherwise, this potential of a demographic dividend and a higher ranking on HDI fund would remain an elusive dream for we as a nation. And even though it's an interim budget, I think some directional changes could always be announced, whichever government comes to power in a couple of months' time post elections, I think could take it forward.
Mr. Krishna, that's important. Last time around, if you look at the allocation to education, it was at 1.12 lakh crore, which was the highest ever allocation. But it's important that you mention that as a percentage of GDP, it's still minuscule. It's obviously an area that we need to focus on so much more. But Jayjit, let me come back to you next. You said a little while back that you expected this budget to be, to continue with the path that we followed on by and large. But specifically, do you believe that there could be revisions in the income tax slabs? Many would argue that that is necessary to spur growth as well.
I think the argument, or really the wish, is that there is further rationalization where more money is put in the pockets of people. But let's just look at what happened in FY23. The total expected revenues is about 27 lakh crores. And out of a total budgetary outlay of 45 lakh crores, about 17, 18 lakh crores was out of debt. Now, fortunately, what has happened is because of better indirect tax collections and, the GST system being very effective, we have already crossed the 16 lakh crore, which was expected to be collected through GST, and we still have got 2 more months to go in terms of Feb and March. So we'll clearly have about 3 lakh crores more of collection, which is good news.
Yes.
But we still need to have the government pump in money in terms of infrastructure being rolled out. There's massive amount of outlay in infrastructure. If you look at expenditure in defense, that's about 13% of the budget. 5.5 lakh crores is being spent compared to education being what you mentioned as 1.4 lakh crores. And that is out of compulsion. Now, we do need to make sure that at the current geopolitical situation that we are in, we have got a strong military in place. And there were some challenges in the military that we had,
As a percentage of GDP growth, our defense budget has been what? It's been at the 1962 levels now for the last several budgets. So that's a huge concern.
That's absolutely true. And therefore, there was revisions in equipment and manpower and so on and so forth needed. And so if you step back and look at, what the government really needs, it cannot afford to reduce the taxes at this point in time. We have seen what has happened in other places where they have reduced the taxes and suddenly the government has slipped into complete turmoil, which has happened in Sri Lanka, it's happened in UK and so on and so forth. I don't think we still have reached a stage where the taxes can be cut across the board.
Okay.
Tax rationalization has happened, simplification has happened, but it has, the slabs may have come down, but because the benefits have been taken out, the total tax outflow from the pockets are roughly the same.
Sure. Okay, what I'm going to do just to start off things is ask my 3 panelists, put them on the spot somewhat. Your top 2 expectations, it's the same question for all of them. So, Mr. Choksi, I know you have about 10 expectations from the budget. Can I just ask you to list your top 2 expectations or what you actually see happening in a few hours from now? Mr. Choksi, you first.
Continued infrastructure spend would be one, and incentivizing small businesses would be 2.
Okay. Infra, and what did you say second, sir?
Incentivizing small businesses. Yes,
incentivizing small businesses. Jayant Krishna?
See, I would feel that, if, India is serious about reducing its carbon footprint and therefore the focus on EV sector is very, very important. The FAME 2 subsidy program, which ends in March this year, I think that needs to continue, I think to promote the EV industry. And second is, I know GST is beyond normally the purview of union budget, but it's very, very important that on battery, if the battery, the recharging and swapping of batteries to be promoted, then the duty, the GST on batteries, standalone batteries has to come down from 18% to 5%, which is anyway in a fully manufactured car. The duty is just about 5%, but if you on a standalone basis, it becomes 18%. So that is becoming a huge challenge to promote swapping. I think this is very, very important to my mind. And secondly, which I said earlier, allocations to education and skills and healthcare have to go up.
All right, GST on batteries needs to come down, a higher allocation for education, and the importance of recognizing that our carbon footprint must come down. So 3 points over there, crucial ones. How about you? 2 points.
One, surely infrastructure. There's no doubt about it. We need far more infrastructure, and that will automatically help MSMEs, education, healthcare, everything. But the number 2 point is also a faster response time to dumping. Because of the geopolitics going on and the disruption in global supply chain, markets like China is not able to sell their products, and large amount of rapid dumping is happening into India. Under the garb that this is protectionism, safeguards are not put into place. Safeguards and protectionism are two different things. We need a rapid response, otherwise many of our MSMEs will be dying out very, very quickly. I do hope that that measure comes in, and I can rattle out industry after industry. PVC suspension at threat. Large amount of investments was lined up. It's not getting rolled out because of duty changes not being put into place. Even in critical minerals, ferromolybdenum, it's at, it's gasping for breath. And so on and so forth. Isopropyl alcohol, very critical component for industries, again under threat from dumping. So we really need to sort that out so that investment starts flowing in, and there is a stability in policy. When people start investing and putting up their plans, they do that under a certain tax regime.
Right.
If suddenly that is changed, that's extremely disruptive.
All right, so you've got a couple of quick comments over there, right up off the top of our experts, 2 or 3 points each on what they expect to see. Infrastructure, I think that's a common sense. Jay-Z's worried about dumping in India. That's a problem. Carbon footprints do need to come down. The GST on batteries. The importance of promoting small businesses. It is across the board, and that really does reflect concerns over the economy, in the sense that if we are to sustain this level of growth, there has to be a broad-based budget. What will Nirmala Sitharaman come up with in the next couple of hours? 11 o'clock, remember, is when the budget presentation begins. She comes into Parliament a short while before that. It'll be a digital budget as usual, so there isn't that usual briefcase which finance ministers in the past used to carry with them. Perhaps there will be a briefcase, but it's going to be mostly a tablet from which she's going to actually read out her key points.